There are moments in a person's life that split everything in two. Before and after, and the strange, breathless silence in between. That's where this story lives. Picture this: a small church in the frontier town of Caldwell, Kansas. The year is 1882. The pews are packed. The wildflowers pressed into tin cans along the windowsills are still fresh. A fiddle player in the corner is doing his best to sound respectable. And at the front of that church, dressed in a pale blue calico gown that took her 3 months to sew by hand, stands a woman named Eleanor May Whitfield. She is 24 years old. She is waiting for her groom, and her groom is not coming. Now, before you think you know where this story goes, I need you to stay right here with me, because what happens next is not what you're expecting. And the man who walks through that church door isn't the man Eleanor was waiting for. He's a stranger. And by the end of this day, he will have changed her life in a way that no one in that little church, not the preacher, not the neighbors, not even Eleanor herself, could have ever seen coming. Are you ready? Good. Let's go back to the beginning. Eleanor May Whitfield came from nothing, and she carried that knowledge like a stone in her chest every single day. Her father had been a farmhand who died of fever when she was 9 years old. Her mother had worked herself into an early grave, taking in laundry for the families along the main road. By the time Eleanor was 17, she was the only one left. A rented room above a dry goods store, a sewing needle, 2 good hands, and the kind of quiet determination that people who have survived real hardship seem to grow like a second skin. She was not beautiful in the way that poets write about, soft and glowing and effortless. Eleanor was handsome, strong-jawed, eyes the color of creek water in early spring, that gray-green that shifts depending on the light. She laughed too loud and had opinions about things women weren't supposed to have opinions about. And she could break down and re-stitch a horse's saddlebag faster than most men in Caldwell. She had never expected anyone to love her. And then came Thomas Aldridge. Thomas was the second son of one of the biggest cattle ranchers in Sumner County. He had a nice face and easy charm, and the kind of smile that made you think everything would be fine, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. He swept into Eleanor's life on a Tuesday afternoon when he brought his mother's dress into the seamstress shop for mending, and he swept back out of it, for good, on the morning of what was supposed to be their wedding. Nobody knew why he left. Not really. There were whispers, of course. There are always whispers in small towns. Some people said he had run off with a saloon girl from Wichita. Some said he had gambling debts that had finally caught up with him. Some said his father had put a stop to the whole thing because he didn't think Eleanor's blood was good enough to mix with the Aldridge name. The truth was probably all three, twisted together like rope. But in the church that morning, none of that mattered. What mattered was the silence, the growing, humiliating, suffocating silence as the minutes stretched past the hour and the fiddle player stopped playing and the preacher cleared his throat, and everyone in those pews started looking at Eleanor and then looking away, the way people do when they witness something they can't fix and don't know what to say. Eleanor stood there. She did not cry. Not yet. She was too stunned for tears. The way you are after a hard fall. That split second where the pain hasn't arrived yet, and your body is just trying to understand what happened. The preacher stepped forward. "Miss Whitfield," he said, soft and careful, the way men speak at funerals. "Perhaps we should—" "I know," Eleanor said. "I know." And that was when the door opened. His name was James Calloway. He was 31 years old, though he looked older, the kind of older that comes not from years, but from weather and long riding and the particular loneliness of a man who has spent most of his adult life in open country with no one to talk to but his horse. He was tall, not the lean, graceful tall of a magazine illustration, but the kind of tall that takes up space and makes low doorways a genuine nuisance. His hat was dark and battered. His coat was the color of old saddle leather. He had a jaw that looked like it had been carved out of the same limestone that made up the Kansas plains, and eyes the color of a winter sky. Not dramatic, not soft, just steady. Permanently, quietly steady. James Calloway was not the kind of man who walked into churches. He had ridden into Caldwell that morning looking for a land surveyor he had an appointment with, taken a wrong turn on account of a hand-painted sign that someone had nailed to a post sideways, and ended up at the front door of the First Methodist Church of Caldwell at the precise moment that history decided it needed him there. He stepped inside. He saw the room full of people. He saw the preacher. He saw the fiddle player standing useless in the corner. He saw the tin cans of wildflowers. And then he saw Eleanor, still standing at the front, still in her blue dress, her chin up, her hands perfectly still at her sides. He understood what had happened in about 4 seconds. He took off his hat. He walked down the aisle, slowly, because he wasn't a man who hurried. And he stopped about 10 feet from Eleanor, and he looked at her for a moment, the way you look at something when you're trying to decide if it's real. Then he said, "Do you have anywhere to go?" The whole church went absolutely still. Eleanor looked at him. This stranger, this weathered, awkward, wrong-turn stranger, standing in the middle of her worst moment, with his hat in his hands, and no particular expression on his face, except something that might have been, if you squinted at it just right, a kind of fundamental decency. "No," she said. James Calloway nodded once, slowly, like she had just answered a question about the weather. Then he turned to the preacher. "Could you marry us instead? Now, I need you to hold on right here, because I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking this is the part where it gets romantic, where the music swells, where Eleanor looks at this stranger and sees something in his eyes and knows, just knows, that this is her destiny. That is not what happened." Eleanor looked at James Calloway and thought, "I don't know this man at all." And James Calloway looked at Eleanor and thought, "She doesn't have to say yes." And the preacher looked at both of them and thought, "Lord, have mercy on us all." But here's the thing about the frontier, about life in 1882 in a cattle town on the edge of the American plains. The thing that people who grew up with safety nets and second chances don't always understand. Sometimes the practical choice and the courageous choice are the exact same thing. Eleanor had no family, no savings, no protector in a world that did not, in any meaningful way, protect unattached women. Thomas Aldridge had just made that abundantly clear. She could walk out of that church today and spend the next 30 years sewing and mending and scraping and being quietly pitied by every person in Caldwell who had watched her stand at that altar and get left. Or she could say yes to a stranger. She thought about it for exactly 45 seconds. She counted them. Later, she would tell people she didn't know why she counted them, except that it felt important to use the time. Then she said, "All right," and the church erupted. Half the people were scandalized, utterly, completely scandalized. A woman marrying a man she didn't know not 2 hours after being abandoned at the altar? The Whisper Network in Caldwell would be busy for months. The other half, though, and this is the part that matters, the other half understood something. This was the frontier. People reinvented themselves out here. People arrived with nothing and built something. People made decisions that looked like madness from the outside and looked like survival from the inside. The West had always been a place where the old rules bent under the weight of necessity, and new ones got forged in whatever fire was available. And there was something about the way James Calloway had walked down that aisle. Not strutting, not performing, just steady, quiet, matter of fact, that made a certain kind of person in those pews think, that man means what he says. The preacher married them. Right there. Right then. In front of everyone who had come to watch a different wedding. Eleanor May Whitfield became Eleanor May Calloway in a ceremony that lasted 11 minutes and was witnessed by 47 people who had not come to witness it. When it was over, James put his hat back on. Eleanor picked up the small bag she had brought for her honeymoon, a carpet bag with 3 days' worth of clothes and a photograph of her mother, and they walked out of the church together into the blazing Kansas midday sun. They stood on the church steps. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Eleanor said, "I don't know your name. I know you told the preacher, but I didn't quite." "James," he said. "James Calloway. I run cattle outside of Comanche County. I have a house. It's not much, but it's solid. I have 2 ranch hands, a dog named Pepper, who bites people he doesn't know, but gets over it fast." He paused. "I'm sorry this is the circumstance. For what it's worth, I meant what I said." Eleanor looked at him. "What did you mean?" she asked. "That you'd have a name," he said, "and somewhere to go. Now, are you the kind of person who believes some things happen for a reason? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious, because this story is about to make you think about that question very hard. Because here is what Eleanor didn't know yet about James Calloway. She didn't know he had come to Caldwell that morning, not just for a land surveyor, but because he was trying to hold together 300 acres of ranch land that his father had left him against a legal challenge from a neighboring family who wanted to buy him out or drive him out, whichever came first. She didn't know that he hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 6 months because of the stress of it. She didn't know that he had once been engaged himself, 8 years earlier, a woman named Clara, who had died of typhoid 3 weeks before their wedding date, and that he had never really gotten around to trying again. She didn't know any of that. And James didn't know anything about Eleanor either. Didn't know she could ride a horse better than she could walk. Didn't know she spoke a little Spanish from the years she'd spent as a girl near the Mexican trading settlement south of town. Didn't know she had a memory like a steel trap and could quote scripture and land law with equal precision. 2 strangers. One name, shared under the Kansas sun. This was what they started with. The wagon ride from Caldwell to the Calloway Ranch took most of the afternoon. James drove. Eleanor sat on the bench beside him. Pepper, a medium-sized, shaggy, deeply suspicious brown dog who had been tied up outside the church, rode in the back and stared at Eleanor with the focused intensity of a professional. They talked. Not about anything important at first. The weather, the condition of the road, whether or not the land surveyor was still going to meet with James, or whether he had given up and left, which turned out to be a genuine concern, and one that ended up mattering quite a lot. But we'll get there. Then Eleanor said, "Why did you do it?" James was quiet for a moment. "I don't rightly know how to explain it," he said. "I walked in, and I saw you standing there, and I thought, that's the loneliest looking thing I've ever seen. And then I thought, she doesn't look like she's going to cry about it. She looks like she's going to stand there until she turns to stone before she lets those people see her break." He kept his eyes on the road. "I felt that way before," he said. "The not breaking. It takes a lot out of a person." Eleanor looked at the horizon. "It does," she said. Pepper stopped staring at Eleanor somewhere around the 2nd hour and put his head in her lap. James noticed and didn't say anything, but something shifted in his face. Something very small, barely visible. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of trust. The way trust starts on the frontier, not with words, but with a dog deciding you're all right. The Calloway Ranch was not, as advertised, much, but it was solid. A 2-room house built from limestone and timber, low to the ground the way frontier houses were, designed to take the wind and not fight it. A barn, a water tank, a kitchen garden that was holding its own against the summer heat. 2 ranch hands, a wiry young man named Pete, and an older, silent man named August, who communicated primarily through meaningful looks and the occasional grunt, who stared at Eleanor with frank bewilderment. "This is my wife," James said. "Eleanor." Pete's mouth fell open. August's eyebrows went up about 1/4 of an inch. For August, this was an extreme reaction. "The wedding was today," James added, as if this clarified anything. Eleanor looked around at the ranch, at the dry grass and the flat horizon, and the enormous, slightly merciless sky. She thought about the room above the dry goods store in Caldwell. She thought about Thomas Aldrich and whatever hole in his character had made him capable of walking away from a woman he had promised to marry. And she thought, I can work with this. The first week was the strangest week of Eleanor's life. She and James occupied the same house, but moved around each other the way 2 people do when they're still calculating distances. He was up before dawn. She was not far behind. There was too much work on that ranch to spend much time standing around being awkward about things. She cooked. He was grateful in a practical, unsentimental way that she appreciated more than she expected. He did not expect her to cook. That became clear in the first morning when he was already making coffee by the time she came into the kitchen, and he poured her a cup without commentary and set it on the table and kept doing what he was doing. Small thing, but on the frontier, small things mean everything. She helped with the accounts. This was the moment when James Calloway first looked at Eleanor with something other than careful, respectful distance. "You read law?" he said, staring at the margin notes she had written on the land survey documents. "I read everything," she said. "I had a lot of time." He sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Tell me what you see," he said. The legal situation with the ranch was this. A family named Hargrove, 3 brothers and their father, who controlled a large section of land adjacent to the Calloway property, had been disputing James's ownership of the eastern pasture for 2 years. They claimed that the original deed from James's father contained a surveying error that gave James land that rightly bordered their property on a diagonal, not a straight line. The difference was about 60 acres, and those 60 acres sat directly above the only reliable water source in that stretch of the county. Water on the Kansas frontier was not a minor matter. Water was survival. Water was cattle. Water was the difference between a working ranch and 60 acres of dust. Eleanor read the documents. She read them again. She sat with them for 3 hours, while James worked outside. And when he came in at midday, she said, "Your father's deed is correct." James stopped in the doorway. "The survey isn't wrong," Eleanor continued. "But the Hargroves found a clerk's error in the county record filing. The transcription from the original deed to the county record dropped a measurement notation. On paper, in the county record, the line looks ambiguous, but the original document uses the creek bed as the eastern boundary marker. If the creek bed is still where it was in 1867, your line is exactly right." James came in and sat down. "The creek," he said slowly, "has moved." Eleanor looked at him. "How far?" "About 20 yards east," he said. "There was flooding in 74. It shifted." They looked at each other. "Can you prove where the creek bed was in 67? Eleanor asked. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's a man in Dodge City, a cartographer. He was out here mapping the county in 66 and 67. If he kept his field notes, then you have your proof," Eleanor said. "This is where I want you to pay attention. Because this is the moment, not the wedding, not the wagon ride, not the dog deciding Eleanor was acceptable. This is the moment when something real started between Eleanor and James Calloway. Not romance. Not yet. Something more durable than that. Something that has a name in the frontier and doesn't really have one anywhere else. Partnership. James rode to Dodge City the following week. He came back 12 days later with the cartographer's field notes, a sworn affidavit, and a county judge who had agreed to review the case based on new evidence. He also came back with a bolt of deep blue wool fabric, which he dropped on the kitchen table without explanation or ceremony, and went back outside to see to the horses. Eleanor looked at the fabric for a long moment. Then she looked out the window at the back of James Calloway, walking toward his barn in the late afternoon light. Pepper sat beside her and wagged his tail once, firmly, as if confirming something. Now, before I tell you how the legal case turned out, I want to stop for a second and ask you something. Because I've been thinking about what makes a person worth following through 300 years of history. And I think it's this: the ability to show up. Not to be perfect, not to be fearless, but to show up. Thomas Aldridge had everything that was supposed to matter: money, name, charm. And when the moment came, he didn't show up. James Calloway walked into the wrong church on a wrong turn and ended up exactly where the story needed him to be. What do you think? Is that fate? Or is it just the way decent people leave doors open? Tell me in the comments. This question is going to keep me up tonight. And if you're not subscribed yet, and you've made it this far, and honestly, if this story hasn't made you hit that subscribe button yet, just wait. We're barely halfway through, and things are about to get considerably more complicated. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The legal case went before a county judge in Sumner County in the October of 1882. James presented the cartographer's field notes. He presented the original deed. He presented a survey conducted by the man he had finally managed to meet with in Caldwell, the one he had been on his way to see when he had taken a wrong turn and walked into Eleanor's worst morning. The Hargroves' lawyer was good, but the evidence was better. The judge ruled in James's favor. The eastern pasture and the water beneath it remained Calloway land. James rode home that evening and told Eleanor before he told anyone else. She was in the kitchen making biscuits. She stopped what she was doing and turned around and looked at him. His face was not triumphant exactly, more like the face of a man who has been holding his breath for 2 years and has just been told he can breathe again. "You kept your land," she said. "We kept our land," he said. The "we" was quiet, matter of fact, the same way everything James Calloway said was quiet and matter of fact. But in the kitchen of that limestone house, with the smell of biscuits in the air and the last of the evening light coming through the single west-facing window, Eleanor felt something unlock in her chest that she hadn't even known was locked. She went back to her biscuits. "There's coffee," she said. "Thank you," he said. They ate dinner together. Pete and August joined them, as they usually did on evenings after a long day. The conversation was about cattle prices and the state of the north fence, and whether the winter was going to come early based on the behavior of the geese. Normal things, frontier things. But under the table, James's hand rested beside Eleanor's on the bench, not touching, not quite, but close. The way things are when they're getting close. October became November. November became the kind of December that the Kansas plains specialize in. Brutal and gray and vast, with a wind that made the limestone walls vibrate at night and reminded everyone inside them that the frontier was not domesticated, no matter how many fences you put up. Eleanor had learned the rhythms of the ranch by then. She knew which of the cattle were difficult in cold weather. She knew that Pete got quiet and homesick around Christmas and needed extra coffee and someone to talk to. She knew that August's right shoulder hurt in the cold and that he would never say so and that you could tell by the particular angle he held himself when he was chopping wood. She knew that James slept poorly. She knew this because the walls of a 2-room frontier house are not particularly thick, and she could hear him moving around in the early hours. Not restless exactly, just awake, in the way of a man who has been alone long enough that sleep has become a habit he does alone. One night in December, she put a cup of coffee outside his door. In the morning, it was gone. The next night, she did it again. After the third night, she came out of her room to find him already awake and in the kitchen, and he was making 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Leave it outside the door." "I know," she said. "You could just come in," he said. Then immediately looked like a man who has said something he wasn't ready to say, and picked up his cup and looked at the window very intently. Eleanor looked at the back of his neck, the particular set of his shoulders, the way he held himself when he was being careful. "All right," she said. Christmas came and went on the Calloway ranch with a simplicity that would have embarrassed the Aldridge family and would not have surprised anyone who had grown up on the frontier. Pete's mother sent a tin of molasses cookies from Missouri. August produced, from somewhere in the mysterious depths of his belongings, a bottle of genuine whiskey that he shared wordlessly with everyone present. Eleanor made a pie from dried apples. James gave her the bolt of blue wool made into a winter coat that she had sewn herself because he had bought the fabric and she had done the rest. And that was that. It was the best Christmas Eleanor could remember. She thought about that for a while afterward, trying to understand it. She had had Christmases that were objectively better, in the material sense. More food, more warmth, more presents. But she had never had one where she felt like she belonged. By February, Pepper had stopped biting people he didn't know. Or rather, Pepper still bit people he didn't know. He bit the mail carrier with notable enthusiasm in the first week of February, but the category of people he knew had expanded, and at the top of that list was Eleanor. Pepper slept on Eleanor's feet. James observed this with the same quiet, careful attention he brought to everything. And one evening in February, the kind of quiet evening when the wind has stopped and the plains go very still, he said, "Are you content here?" Eleanor was mending a shirt. She stopped. "Yes," she said, and then, because she had spent long enough being careful with words around this man and was tired of it, "Are you?" James looked at the fire. "More than I've been in a while," he said. Another silence. Then, "I want to say something," James said. He said it the way he said most things, slowly, like he was measuring the words before he let them out. "I know this wasn't what you planned. I know I'm not. I know this is not." "James," Eleanor said. He stopped. "I know what this is," she said. "I've known for a while. I just wasn't sure you did." He looked at her. "What do you think it is?" he said. And this is the part where Eleanor Calloway, who had been left at the altar by one man and claimed by a stranger, and had spent 8 months building a life out of what the stranger had offered, said something that was the most honest thing she had ever said to another human being. She said, "I think it's a life." She said it simply. No drama. No flourish. Just the quiet weight of a true thing, set down between them like something solid. James looked at her for a long moment. Then he moved across the room and sat down beside her on the bench and put his hand, finally, on top of hers. And they sat there in front of the fire, and outside the Kansas winter pressed its cold hands against the limestone walls, and inside the heat held. Spring came the way spring always comes on the frontier. Not gently, not gradually, but in a rush, like a door blowing open. One morning there was frost on the window, and by afternoon, the sky was the color of cornflowers, and you could smell the grass beginning to return. It was in March that Thomas Aldridge came back. This is the part of the story where I need you to pay attention again, because this is where it gets complicated, and where you find out what Eleanor and James were actually made of. Thomas arrived on a Monday, unannounced, on a horse that looked like it had been ridden hard. His face was thinner than Eleanor remembered, and there was something in his eyes that she didn't recognize at first, and then recognized as the particular look of a man who has been humbled by circumstances and hasn't quite forgiven himself for it yet. Eleanor was in the kitchen garden when she heard the horse. She turned and shaded her eyes and saw him riding in from the road. She stood very still. Thomas pulled up and got off his horse and took off his hat and looked at her and said, "Eleanor," she said. "Thomas." And that was all either of them said for a moment. Because what do you say? What language exists for this particular situation? A woman standing in her kitchen garden on land she has made her own, looking at the man who left her standing in a church 8 months ago. James came out of the barn. He saw Thomas. He saw Eleanor. He came across the yard at his regular pace. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady. And he stood beside Eleanor and looked at Thomas Aldridge with the specific quality of attention that a man gives to something he needs to assess carefully. "This is Thomas Aldridge," Eleanor said. James nodded once. "I know who it is," he said quietly. Thomas looked at James. He looked back at Eleanor. "I wanted to," he started. He stopped. He started again. "I wanted to apologize. I know that doesn't. I know it isn't enough. I know that, but I wanted you to hear it from me." He looked at the ground for a moment, then back up. "I was a coward. I had debts. I had my father telling me things that I should have. I should have stood up to all of it. I didn't. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me. I'm just here to say, it wasn't you. It was never you." Eleanor looked at him for a long time. The kitchen garden was very quiet. Somewhere in the barn, a horse shifted. The wind moved through the new grass. And Eleanor Calloway, who had every right in the world to say things that would have taken Thomas Aldridge apart piece by piece, because she had spent 8 months thinking of exactly what those things would be, looked at this man who had unmade her and remade her without knowing he was doing either, and said, "I know." She said it without cruelty, without satisfaction, just a statement of fact, clean and final. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I hope you find your way to being the person you're capable of being, Thomas. I mean that." Thomas looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked at James. Something passed between them. Not hostility, but a kind of acknowledgement. The quiet recognition of two men who understand that one of them is where the other wanted to be. Thomas put his hat back on. He rode away. James and Eleanor stood in the kitchen garden and watched him go. "You all right?" James said. Eleanor thought about it. "Yes," she said. Then, "It's strange. I thought, when I used to think about that day, I thought if I ever saw him again, I'd feel..." She paused. "I don't know. Anger, maybe. Or grief. Or something that needed to come out of me." "And instead," James said. Eleanor looked at the road where Thomas had disappeared. "Instead, I just feel like he's a story that's already finished," she said. "And this one isn't." James looked at her sidelong. "This one," he said carefully. "This one," she said. "Ours." He reached out and took her hand, the way he did things, quietly, without announcement, because James Calloway believed that real things didn't need announcing. "No," he agreed. "This one isn't finished." What Eleanor and James built over the years that followed was not the stuff of songs or dime novels. It was real, which is considerably more interesting. The ranch grew, not quickly. Nothing on the frontier grows quickly, except debt and trouble. But steadily, in the way of things that are properly tended. They acquired more land. They hired 2 more ranch hands. They made a name in Sumner County for producing cattle that were well-fed and carefully managed, which translated into prices that were better than the county average by about 15%. Eleanor's reputation as someone who could read a contract and find the problem in it spread through the county the way reputations do on the frontier, through specific incidents, retold in the specific detail that frontier people love. She helped 3 other families with land disputes, similar to the one she had solved for James. She did it without charging them anything, because that wasn't the point. The point, as she explained to James when he asked, was that people who are secure in their land don't become desperate, and desperate people make the frontier harder for everyone. James listened to this and said, "You'd have made a good lawyer." Eleanor said, "I would have made a terrifying lawyer." He laughed. He didn't laugh often, but when he did, it was the real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine. And Eleanor had decided early on that making James Calloway laugh was one of the better things she could do with her time. They had 3 children. A daughter first, Margaret Ann, born in the summer of 1884, named for nobody but herself, with her mother's creek water eyes and her father's immovable calm, and, tragically, her father's absolute stubbornness about everything she had decided was true. Then a son, William James, 1886, who turned out to have Eleanor's memory and James's gift for reading land, and grew up to be the kind of man that both his parents recognized and were proud of. And then another daughter, Clara Louise, 1889, who was named for the woman James had lost before Eleanor, which was how James told Eleanor about Clara for the first time, handing her a cup of coffee one morning and saying quietly that he'd like to name the next one Clara if she was a girl, if Eleanor was all right with that. Eleanor had been very still for a moment, and then said, "Yes, of course," and that was all that was said about it. But in the particular economy of the Calloway household, it was an enormous thing, because it meant James had given Eleanor something he had kept behind glass for 8 years. He trusted her with it. The children grew up knowing the particular truths of frontier life, that the land asks things of you, and you had better be prepared to give them, that neighbors matter more than anything you can own, and that the worst moments and the best moments of a life are frequently the same moment, viewed from different angles. Margaret asked, when she was about 12, how her parents had met. Eleanor and James looked at each other. James said, "I took a wrong turn." Eleanor said, "I was standing in a church waiting for someone who didn't come." Margaret, who had her mother's instinct for the shape of a story, said, "And then what?" "And then your father asked me if I had anywhere to go," Eleanor said. "And I said no, and he gave me his name." Margaret thought about this. "That's the whole story," she said. Eleanor looked at James. "That's the beginning," she said. "The story is everything that came after." James Calloway died in the spring of 1912, aged 61, from the kind of heart failure that takes a man on a Tuesday morning without warning or ceremony. The way the prairie takes things, swiftly, completely, with no particular interest in your feelings about it. Eleanor was beside him. She held his hand, and she didn't leave the room. And when it was over, she sat there for a while with the morning light coming through the window, and Pepper's grandchildren, because Pepper himself had lived to the extraordinary age of 16 before departing with the dignity of someone who has accomplished everything he set out to do, lying on the floor near the door. Then she stood up. She called for her children. She made coffee. She began the work of being a widow, which is its own particular kind of strength, the kind that people don't talk about as much as they should. She ran the ranch for 9 more years. She did it well, the way she did most things. She died in the autumn of 1921, at the age of 63, in the same bed she had shared with James for 29 years, in the same limestone house he had described on the steps of the church in Caldwell. Not much, but solid. Her children were there, her grandchildren. And on the wall beside the bed, where it had hung for nearly 40 years, was the bolt of blue wool fabric that James Calloway had bought in Dodge City when he came back with the cartographer's field notes. She had made it into a coat and worn the coat until it wore out, and then cut the good pieces and made them into something else, and cut those good pieces and made them into something else again, until what remained was just this: a square of fabric. Not large enough to be anything, just a reminder of a man who had stopped in a place he wasn't supposed to be and asked a simple question. Do you have anywhere to go? No, then let me give you my name. I want to leave you with something. We spend a lot of time in our lives waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right circumstances, the thing that makes sense, that looks like it was planned, that follows the logic of the story we thought we were in. James Calloway took a wrong turn. Eleanor Whitfield's plan fell apart completely. And out of that, out of a wrong turn and a plan that failed, and a stranger who took off his hat and asked a simple question, something was built that lasted 40 years and produced 3 children and helped a community hold its land and created a woman who became, in time, exactly who she was always capable of being, just without anyone blocking the door. The frontier didn't care about your plans. It cared about what you did when the plans failed. What would you have done, standing in Eleanor's shoes, in that blue calico dress, in that church full of silence? Would you have said yes to a stranger? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. This is a story I find myself thinking about differently every time I revisit it, about wrong turns and right moments, and the particular courage of saying yes when everything in you wants to say no, because saying no feels safer, and saying yes is the only thing that changes anything. Eleanor said yes, and James Calloway, who had walked into the wrong church on the wrong morning with the right instinct and a hat in his hands, built a life worth having with a woman he had chosen in 45 seconds in a town he had never meant to stop in. Not much, but solid. This video is an artistic AI reconstruction. The characters, events, and dialogue presented are fictional, created for entertainment purposes. Please consult historical sources for accurate accounts of frontier life in the American West.